11 Days in the Amazon. The Girl Who Fell from the Sky. Act 1, Christmas Eve. December 24, 1971, 12:30 p.m. Jorge Chávez International Airport, Lima, Peru. 17-year-old Juliane Koepcke stands with her mother in a crowded terminal. Christmas Eve. Every flight is overbooked. Cancellations from the day before have created chaos. They've been waiting to board LANSA Flight 508, the only airline with available seats, the only way to get home for Christmas. Juliane's father, Hans Wilhelm, had urged his wife to avoid flying with LANSA. The airline has a terrible reputation, poor safety record, mechanical failures, but they're determined. Juliane had just graduated from high school the day before. She'd convinced her parents to stay in Lima for the ceremony. Now they need to get home, to Panguana, the research station deep in the Amazon where her father waits. "I think it will be okay," her mother says. The flight is an hour, just 1 hour. They board the Lockheed L-188A Electra turboprop. Juliane takes the window seat. Her mother sits beside her. The plane lifts off, climbs to 21,000 feet. For 25 minutes, everything is normal. Snacks, conversations, the hum of engines. Then the sky changes. Dark clouds roll in. The plane enters a thunderstorm. Severe turbulence. The aircraft begins to shake violently. Juliane sees a very bright light on the outer engine on the left. Her mother says, very calmly, "That is the end. It's all over." Those are the last words Juliane ever hears from her. The plane is struck by lightning mid-flight and begins to disintegrate before plummeting to the ground. The cabin tears apart. Metal screaming. People screaming. The roar of wind. Juliane finds herself ejected from the plane, still strapped to her seat, plummeting in freefall mode 10,000 feet into the Amazon jungle. She later recalls thinking that the tops of the trees resembled heads of broccoli as she was plummeting to the earth. Then nothing. Consciousness fails. The world goes black. This is the story of a girl who fell 2 miles from the sky and lived, who spent 11 days alone in the most unforgiving environment on Earth, who survived not through luck alone, but through lessons learned in childhood, lessons she never imagined would save her life. But first, she has to survive the fall. Act 2. The Impossible Landing. When Juliane awoke the next morning, she was alone in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, bruised, battered, and with a broken collarbone and a deep gash in her arm. She was suffering from a concussion, her right eye was swollen shut, and she had large gashes on her arms and legs. A ruptured ligament in her knee made walking difficult. But she was alive. Out of 92 passengers and crew, she is the only one still breathing. Experts believe she survived because she was harnessed into her seat, the window seat attached to 2 seats to her left as part of a row of 3. This may have functioned as a parachute or helicopter which slowed her fall. The impact may have also been lessened by the updraft from the thunderstorm, as well as the thick foliage at her landing site. I didn't wake up until 9 o'clock the next morning. I know this because my watch was still working, so I must have been unconscious the whole afternoon and the night. When I came to, I was alone, just me and my row of seats. She unbuckles, takes stock. A 17-year-old girl in a cotton mini dress. 1 white sandal. No food, no water, no supplies. Kilometer upon kilometer of trackless rainforest in every direction. And teenage years that had improbably prepared her for just such an occasion. Act 3. The Childhood That Saved Her Life. Juliane was born in Lima, Peru, on October 10, 1954, the only child of German zoologists Maria and Hans Wilhelm Koepcke. Her parents were working at Lima's Museum of Natural History when she was born. At the age of 14, she left Lima with her parents to establish the Panguana research station in the Amazon rainforest, where she learned survival skills. Not classroom theory, real skills, practical knowledge earned through experience. Her parents often took her on expeditions, teaching her about plants, animals, and survival skills. These early experiences not only bonded her with nature but also unknowingly equipped her with the survival instincts that would one day save her life. There were 3 basic survival lessons she learned from her zoologist father and ornithologist mother. It is not the big animals but the insects, spiders, ants, flies, and mosquitoes that kill you. Find a river, that is where you find humans living. Do not be tempted to eat any fruit, that could be poisonous. I grew up knowing that nothing is really safe, not even the solid ground I walked on. Koepcke would later tell the New York Times in 2021. The memories have helped me again and again to keep a cool head even in difficult situations. Now, alone in the jungle, those memories become her compass, her map, her only chance. Act 4. The search for mother. Her first priority was to find her mother, who had been seated next to her. She calls out, screams her mother's name, listens for a response. Nothing, just the jungle, birds, insects, the rustling of leaves. Her search proved unsuccessful. But she does find something. At the crash site, she found a bag of sweets which would become her only food. And then she finds something worse. As she continued walking, Juliane found the bodies of other plane crash victims, many of whom were still strapped to their seats. I was horrified. I didn't want to touch them, but I wanted to make sure that my mother wasn't one of them. So I took a stick and knocked a shoe off one of the bodies. The toenails had nail polish on them, and I knew it could not have been my mother because she never used nail polish, she recalled. It was later discovered that 14 of her fellow passengers, her mother included, had survived the fall but perished in the following days awaiting rescue. Maria Koepcke died somewhere in that jungle, injured, alone, waiting for help that never came. But Juliane doesn't know this yet. Right now, she only knows she has to move, stay still and die, move and maybe live. Rescue planes and search crews were unable to locate the crash site, and Koepcke was stranded in the jungle alone. He said if you find a creek, follow it because that will lead to a stream and a stream will lead to a bigger river, and that's where you'll find help. Her father's voice in her head, clear as day. Find water. Follow it downstream. Act 5. The river is the highway. She set out to find her mother but was unsuccessful. On the way, however, Koepcke had come across a small well. Though she was feeling hopeless at this point, she remembered her father's advice to follow water downstream, as that's where civilization would be. Waterways are highways in the forest. People live by rivers, and rivers always lead somewhere. Those words carried her forward. She finds a tiny stream, no wider than her arm, but it's moving, and that means it will grow. Wading in the creek served more than one purpose. The cool water soothed her aching body, while the stream itself carved a natural path through otherwise impenetrable jungle. She knew that dense undergrowth could exhaust her in minutes, and the mud could easily hide venomous snakes. By staying midstream, she cut down her risks. Her wilderness knowledge helped when she reached the river too. The undergrowth along the bank was too dense to allow for progress, so Juliane opted to float down the middle. There, she knew potentially lethal stingrays won't go, preferring the shallows, and also that piranhas are not a threat in quickly moving water. Sometimes I would see a crocodile on the bank and it would start into the water towards me, but I was not afraid. I knew crocodiles don't tend to attack humans. This is what separates Juliane from every other passenger on that plane. Not courage, not luck, knowledge. She understands the jungle, knows which threats are real and which are exaggerated, knows how to read the water, the trees, the sounds. The Amazon isn't trying to kill her. It's indifferent, and indifference, if you understand it, can be survived. Act 6. The wounds that won't heal. Days pass. 3, 4, 5. The next 8 days were spent weakly clambering through the jungle, with just some sweets she had recovered from the wreckage as sustenance. Needless to say, avoiding insect bites in the Amazon is a difficult task at the best of times. But nights were particularly difficult for Juliane. Suffering from numerous bites, she was rarely able to sleep and quickly became weaker and weaker. Her broken collarbone throbs with every movement. Her knee sends sharp pain up her leg with every step. But it's the cut on her arm that becomes the real threat. While in the jungle, She dealt with severe insect bites and an infestation of botfly larvae in her injured arm. Maggots, dozens of them, burrowing into her flesh. She can feel them moving, wriggling, feeding on her. The smell is overwhelming. The wound is infected, swelling, turning colors no wound should turn. If she doesn't do something, the infection will kill her before she reaches civilization. Act 7. The Hut. After 10 days, starved and exhausted, Koepcke finally came upon a small boat and a hut on the river. She had stumbled across a seasonal camp belonging to some loggers. The hut is empty, but it contains something that will change everything. Inside the hut, she found a palm leaf roof, an outboard motor, and a liter of gasoline. Gasoline. I had a wound on my upper right arm. It was infested with maggots about 1 centimeter long. I remembered our dog had the same infection and my father had put kerosene in it. So I sucked the gasoline out and put it into the wound. The pain was beyond words, searing through her arm like fire. The pain was intense as the maggots tried to get further into the wound. I pulled out about 30 maggots and was very proud of myself. I remember having seen my father when he cured a dog of worms in the jungle with gasoline. I got some gasoline and poured it on myself. I counted the worms when they started to slip out. There were 35 on my arm. 35 maggots, extracted with gasoline and willpower. That moment marked a turning point. For the first time since the crash, Juliane was no longer only enduring. She was actively fighting back. She decided to spend the night there and wait. Act 8. The Voices of Angels. The next day, she heard the voices of several men outside. It was like hearing the voices of angels. The loggers were astonished to show up and discover a blonde woman in their camp. A 17-year-old girl, emaciated, covered in wounds and insect bites, one sandal, dress torn and filthy, speaking Spanish with a German accent, telling an impossible story about falling from a plane. A few hours later, the returning lumberjacks found her, poured gasoline onto her wound, and used a canoe to transport her for 11 hours to a more inhabited area. She was then airlifted to a hospital. After a 7-hour boat ride, she arrived at a small missionary facility where she remained for several days, receiving medical attention and food, before she was able to take a flight to her original destination of Pucallpa to finally meet her father. 11 days, from the moment the plane disintegrated to the moment she reached help. 11 days in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. She was the only one of 92 passengers to survive, the sole survivor of LANSA Flight 508. Act 9. The Reunion and the Reckoning. Hans Wilhelm Koepcke receives the news at Panguana. His daughter is alive. His wife is not. Her mother's body was found a few days later, and it was discovered she had also survived the crash but was badly injured and died several days later. The reunion is bittersweet. Father and daughter embrace in a hospital room. One survived. One didn't. The mathematics of tragedy make no sense. Heartbroken by the loss of his wife, her father withdrew into his work, and Koepcke was estranged from him for many years. Juliane assisted search parties to help locate the crash site and recover the bodies of the victims, including her mother. The crash of LANSA Flight 508 is listed in the Guinness Book of World Records for having the highest death toll, 91, caused by lightning, in flight. Later investigations found that LANSA had a poor safety record, and the airline was shut down not long after the crash. The plane should never have flown through that storm. The pilots knew. The airline knew. But Christmas schedules took priority over safety. 91 people paid for that decision with their lives. Juliane Koepcke paid for it with 11 days in hell and a lifetime of survivor's guilt. Act 10. The Silence. There was media furor when Koepcke stumbled out of the jungle, but eventually, the attention was too much to bear. She started turning down interview requests, a pattern she held for the next 30 years. She returns to Germany, focuses on her education, studies biology like her parents. She earned a doctorate and became a German-Peruvian mammalogist who specializes in bats. She returned to the area in the early 80s to study the area's native bats. But the trauma follows her. The nightmares, the questions. Why did she survive when others didn't? Why did her mother die while she lived? There are no good answers. Only the relentless mathematics of chance. For nearly 3 decades, Juliane refuses to speak publicly about the crash. Too painful, too raw. Then, in 1998, something changes. Act 11. Herzog and the Return. German filmmaker Werner Herzog contacted her for his documentary Wings of Hope. She finally broke her media silence. Herzog, long fascinated by death and mortality as subjects, was originally scheduled to be on LANSA Flight 508. A last-minute change of plans in his location scouting itinerary saved his life, and it took him decades to track her down. Think about that. The director who makes the definitive documentary about the crash was supposed to be on the plane. He changed his plans at the last minute. Another life saved by chance. Another person who shouldn't be alive. Herzog and Juliane return to the crash site together. She walks through the jungle again, traces the route she took, stands where she fell from the sky. A monument was erected right next to the airport. It features a crashing plane depicted in plaster, with a map showing the route she traveled through the jungle. The documentary becomes cathartic, a way to process, to speak the unspeakable, and it opens the door for something more. Act 12. The Book. In 2011, Koepcke's autobiography Als ich vom Himmel fiel, Wie mir der Dschungel mein Leben zurückgab, When I Fell from the Sky, How the Jungle Gave Me My Life Back, was released. The book won that year's Corine Literature Prize. In it, she describes everything: the fall, the search for her mother, the bodies, the hunger, the pain, the maggots, the rescue. But more than that, she describes what the jungle taught her. Not just survival skills, something deeper: resilience, adaptation, the ability to keep moving when every rational part of your brain screams to stop. Her story demonstrates the importance of remaining calm under pressure, trusting one's instincts, and respecting the power of nature. The fundamental lesson: be realistic about the situation you find yourself in, recognize those elements that you cannot control, and work out the things you are in control of to better the situation. She couldn't control the plane crash, couldn't control her injuries, couldn't control the jungle, but she could control her response, her choices, her will to keep going, and that made all the difference. Act 13. The Legacy. In 1989, Koepcke married Erich Diller, a German entomologist who specializes in parasitic wasps. In 2000, following the death of her father, she took over as director of Penguana. She currently serves as a librarian at the Bavarian State Collection of Zoology in Munich. In 2019, the government of Peru made her a Grand Officer of the Order of Merit for Distinguished Services. She continues her parents' work, protecting the rainforest, studying its creatures, fighting deforestation and colonization. The jungle that almost killed her becomes the jungle she dedicates her life to saving. Her survival has been the subject of numerous books and films, including the 1974 Italian film I Miracoli Accadono Ancora, Miracles Still Happen, and Werner Herzog's 1998 documentary Wings of Hope. But Juliane herself remains humble, reluctant to be called a hero. Journalist Franz Lids noted that she was initially reluctant to participate in interviews until he convinced her he just wanted to write about the science of it, rather than focusing on the childhood trauma. Because that's what Juliane is at her core: a scientist, someone who observes, documents, understands. The crash was trauma. The jungle was survival. But the life afterward, that's where the real story lives. Epilogue. What Falling Teaches. December 24, 1971. Plane disintegrates. 92 souls fall from the sky. Only one survives the fall. Only one survives the jungle. Not because she was lucky. Not because she was chosen by God or fate or chance. Because she knew things. Because her parents taught her. because she'd spent her childhood learning to read a jungle that most people only see as green chaos. But here's the deeper truth. Knowledge alone wouldn't have saved her. Plenty of people know facts about the Amazon, could recite survival techniques, could explain which insects are dangerous and which rivers are safe. But Juliane did something most people couldn't do. She kept going. With a broken collarbone, torn ligament, infected wounds, starvation, exhaustion, she kept going. That's the real lesson. Not the survival skills, not the lucky fall through tree branches, not the rescue by loggers. The decision to keep moving even when stopping seems easier. Remember, my friend, it is not what happens that counts. It is how you react to them. Her story emphasizes the importance of wilderness knowledge and the will to survive, no matter how dire the circumstances. Today, Juliane Koepcke is 70 years old. She still lives partly in Peru, still works at Panguana, still studies bats and fights for rainforest conservation. She doesn't talk about the crash unless asked. And even then, she focuses on the science, the biology, the ecology, not the terror, not the loss, not the 11 days of impossibility. Because dwelling on trauma doesn't honor survival. Action does. Work does. Continuing your parents' legacy does. The jungle didn't give her life back. She took it back. One step at a time. One stream to the next. One decision after another. And in doing so, she proved something that sounds impossible until you see it happen. You can fall 2 miles from the sky and still walk out of the jungle. You can lose your mother and still become a scientist. You can survive the unsurvivable and still live a quiet, purposeful life dedicated to protecting the very wilderness that almost killed you. The Amazon rainforest still stands. Panguana still operates. The research continues. And somewhere in Munich, in a library filled with specimens and books, sits a woman who knows something most of us will never learn. That the human will to survive is stronger than gravity. Stronger than injury, stronger than fear, that falling doesn't mean failing, and that sometimes the jungle doesn't kill you. Sometimes, improbably, impossibly, it lets you go.